Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the hushed confines of the bedroom, the phone slipped back onto the nightstand, signaling the call's abrupt end. Graham Mitchell, whose hair bears the telltale rake of anxious fingers, ponders a decision that starkly contrasts his disciplined life. He just agreed, within 5 brief minutes, to a proposal that transforms a simple Tuesday into a momentous one. Eliza, Graham's younger sibling, is the epitome of spontaneity. Their conversation, fraught with tears, reveals a sudden change in her life's trajectory. Eliza, a dancer with a lifelong promise of success, now faces an unexpected turn with a broken leg on the cusp of a potentially career-defining showcase. Begging Graham for help, she appeals to his sense of familial duty and love. "Please, Graham, the judges need to see my choreography performed. My future depends on it." The request was absurd, preposterous, completely outside the realm of possibility. "I'll do it," he had said, the words tumbling out before his logical mind could stop them. Now, sitting on the edge of his bed in gray sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, reality began to sink in. Graham had agreed to perform in his sister's place, in her costume, as her. "You have a similar build, and with some makeup and a wig, no one will know," Eliza had insisted. "You took those dance classes with me when we were kids. The muscle memory is still there." That was true, at least partially. Their parents had enrolled them both in dance lessons until Graham was 14 and declared he wanted to focus on academics instead, but that was nearly 20 years ago. The closet door stood slightly ajar, revealing the garment bag Eliza had couriered over immediately after their call. Inside hung a sparkly pink tutu and the silver ballet slippers she'd worn during rehearsals. Rising from the bed, Graham approached the closet with the caution of someone nearing a sleeping bear. He unzipped the garment bag, revealing the costume in its full glory. The bodice was covered in iridescent sequins that caught the morning light streaming through the window. The tutu itself was layers upon layers of pink tulle, stiff enough to hold its shape but delicate enough to flutter with movement.
"I must be insane,"
he muttered, touching the fabric tentatively. "Completely and utterly insane." His phone buzzed with a text message. "Eliza. My instructor will meet you at the studio at 2 p.m. Her name is Madame Beaumont. Don't be late. And thank you." Graham checked the time. 9:17 a.m. Less than 5 hours to prepare for the first lesson. Eliza had promised to coach him through video calls for the next week until the performance, but today would be his introduction to Madame Beaumont, who apparently knew about the switch and had reluctantly agreed to help. The bathroom mirror reflected a man who looked nothing like a ballet dancer. Broad shoulders, a day's worth of stubble, and calloused hands from weekend carpentry projects. Graham splashed cold water on his face and tried to imagine himself pirouetting across a stage in pink tulle. "The things we do for family," he sighed. The dance studio was housed in a converted warehouse downtown, its industrial exterior belying the elegant space within. Graham arrived 15 minutes early, carrying a duffel bag containing the costume and a list of instructions from Eliza. The reception area was empty except for a teenage girl behind the desk, who barely looked up from her phone.
"I'm here to meet Madame Beaumont,"
Graham said, his voice coming out higher than intended. The receptionist pointed down a hallway. "Studio 3. She's expecting you." Heart hammering against his ribs, Graham followed the sound of classical music to a room with mirrored walls and a gleaming wooden floor. A woman in her 60s stood in the center, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, her posture impeccable. "You must be Eliza's brother," she said, her French accent thick, but her English precise. "I am Madame Beaumont."
"Graham Mitchell,"
he replied, extending his hand.
"Thank you for agreeing to this unusual arrangement."
The dance instructor's handshake was surprisingly firm.
"Eliza is one of my most promising students. Her choreography deserves to be seen."
Her eyes scanned Graham from head to toe. "We have much work to do. Have you brought the costume?" Nodding, Graham held up the duffel bag.
"Good. The changing rooms are through there. You will need to wear the costume for our lessons so that you become accustomed to moving in it."
The men's changing room was mercifully empty. Graham locked himself in a stall and unpacked the items one by one. Pink tights, a flesh-colored leotard, the sequined bodice, the tutu, and the silver ballet slippers. Eliza had included detailed instructions for putting everything on correctly. 10 minutes later, he stood before the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing himself. The costume fit surprisingly well, though it highlighted how different his body was from his sister's. Where she was graceful, he was angular. Where she was soft, he was rigid.
"This is never going to work,"
he whispered to his reflection. A knock on the door startled him. "Are you ready, Monsieur Mitchell?" Madame Beaumont called.
"Just a moment,"
he answered, taking a deep breath and gathering his courage. Stepping out of the changing room felt like walking naked into a crowded room. Madame Beaumont's expression remained neutral as she assessed him. "Your sister included this," she said, holding up a wig of long auburn hair. "Come." She positioned him in front of a makeup station in the corner of the studio and worked quickly, applying foundation to soften his features and attaching the wig with pins and spray. The transformation was startling. The person in the mirror still wasn't Eliza, but was no longer quite Graham either.
"For the purposes of our training, I will call you Bonnie, the name your sister uses for her performances," Madame Beaumont announced. "It will help you inhabit the role." "Bonnie," Graham repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "Now, let us begin with the basics. First position."
The week passed in a blur of blisters, muscle aches, and increasingly lengthy sessions with both Madame Beaumont in person and Eliza via video call. Graham's days became structured around learning the choreography, practicing until his legs trembled and his arms felt like lead. What surprised him most wasn't the physical challenge, though that was considerable, but how quickly he adapted to being called Bonnie. Whenever he entered the studio, he stepped into her identity as surely as he stepped into the silver ballet slippers. By Thursday, Madame Beaumont had stopped correcting his form every few seconds, and instead watched with narrowed eyes as he completed entire sequences. "Your lines are improving," she conceded. "But you must feel the music, Bonnie. This piece tells a story of transformation, of becoming." Graham, no, Bonnie during these hours, nodded and tried again, focusing on the emotion behind the movement, rather than just the technical execution. That evening, alone in his apartment, he found himself practicing in front of the hallway mirror, wearing the tights and leotard, but not the full costume. Something had shifted in his perception. The movements that had felt foreign on Monday now seemed to flow from some forgotten part of himself. His phone rang, Eliza calling for their nightly review session. "You're looking better," she said when the video connected. "More confident." Bonnie smiled, surprising herself with how naturally the expression came. "Madame Beaumont is a miracle worker." "How does it feel?" Eliza asked, her voice softer. "Being Bonnie?" The question caught her off guard. How did it feel? different, liberating in a way she couldn't quite articulate. "It's not what I expected," Bonnie admitted. "At first it felt like playing pretend, but now—" She trailed off, unsure how to continue. Eliza's expression was unreadable through the pixelated video. Now I'm not sure where Graham ends and Bonnie begins," she confessed. "Is that weird?" "No," Eliza said after a moment. "I think that means you're ready." The day of the showcase arrived with gray skies and a nervous flutter in Bonnie's stomach. The performance would take place at the Winter Garden Theater, an intimate venue known for launching dance careers. Eliza would be there in the audience, her leg in a cast, but her spirit supporting her sibling from the third row. Backstage was chaos. Dancers warming up, costume adjustments, last-minute choreography reviews. Bonnie found a quiet corner to prepare, going through the familiar ritual of transforming from Graham into the auburn-haired ballerina who would take the stage. "Nervous?" asked a voice beside her. Turning, Bonnie saw a dancer she recognized from rehearsals, Diane, who would perform 2 slots after her. "Terrified," Bonnie admitted, adjusting her tutu. Diane smiled. "You'll be amazing. I saw you in rehearsal yesterday. Your technique has this authentic quality. It's beautiful." The compliment warmed Bonnie unexpectedly. "Thank you." "5 minutes, dancers!" called the stage manager, sending a fresh wave of anxiety through the backstage area. Madame Beaumont appeared at Bonnie's side, her usual stern expression softened with what might have been pride. "Remember what we discussed, Bonnie. The judges are not just looking for technique. They want to see your soul through the dance." Nodding, Bonnie took her position in the wings. The current performer was taking her final bow, the audience's applause washing over the stage like a wave. "Next, we have Bonnie Mitchell performing Emergence, an original piece choreographed by Eliza Mitchell," announced the MC. The stage lights dimmed. Bonnie stepped into position, the silver ballet slippers silent against the polished floor. In the darkness, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The first notes of the music filled the theater, a haunting piano melody that started softly and built in intensity. The spotlight found her, and Bonnie began to move. The choreography told the story of a chrysalis transforming into a butterfly, struggling at first against the confines of its shell, then gradually embracing the metamorphosis, and finally emerging in glorious flight. Every movement had meaning, every gesture conveyed part of the narrative. As Bonnie danced, something unexpected happened. The anxiety faded, replaced by a sense of profound rightness. This wasn't just Eliza's story anymore. It was her own. The transformation depicted in the dance mirrored the change happening within herself. The final sequence approached, a series of technically challenging turns, followed by a moment of stillness meant to represent the butterfly's first moments of freedom. Bonnie executed the turns flawlessly, feeling the sparkly pink tutu swirl around her as she spun. When she struck the final pose, one arm extended toward the sky, she realized there were tears in her eyes. The audience erupted in applause, and Bonnie felt a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Taking her bow, she caught sight of Eliza in the third row, standing despite her cast, applauding with tears streaming down her face. Backstage again, Bonnie was surrounded by fellow dancers offering congratulations. Madame Beaumont approached with an uncharacteristic smile. "Magnifique," she said simply, squeezing Bonnie's hand. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. When the judges announced they would post results the following day, Bonnie felt strangely calm, Whatever happened next, she had experienced something transformative on that stage. Eliza was waiting in the lobby, leaning on her crutches. "You were incredible," she said, embracing her sibling. "Better than I could have been." "Don't say that," Bonnie protested. "It was your choreography that made it special." "No," Eliza insisted. "It was you. You brought something to it that I never could have." They made their way to a nearby cafe, Bonnie still in her stage makeup, though she'd changed into a simple black dress that Eliza had brought for after the performance. Over coffee, they dissected every moment of the showcase, laughing and analyzing the other performances. "So what happens now?" Eliza asked eventually. "Do you go back to being Graham tomorrow?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Bonnie's consciousness. Go back? The thought felt strangely foreign, as if she was being asked to return to a country she'd emigrated from long ago. "I don't know," Bonnie admitted. "I hadn't thought beyond today." Eliza's expression was gentle. "You don't have to decide anything right now. But I saw you up there. I've never seen you look so happy." The call came the next morning. Bonnie was at her apartment, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, her auburn wig carefully placed on a stand by her bedside. The voice on the phone belonged to Madame Beaumont. "The judges were most impressed with your performance, Bonnie," she said. "They have offered you a scholarship to the Academy's advanced program." Bonnie nearly dropped the phone. "A scholarship? But I'm not... They believe you have more natural talent than many dancers they've seen. They specifically mentioned an authenticity in your performance that cannot be taught." The implications slowly sank in. They wanted Bonnie, not Graham pretending to be Bonnie, but the dancer they had seen on stage.
"There is another matter," Madame Beaumont continued. "The International Ballet Competition has expressed interest in having you perform at their gala next month. It would be an extraordinary opportunity." Bonnie's voice faltered. "I need to think about this." "Of course. Call me tomorrow with your decision." After hanging up, Bonnie sat motionless on the edge of the bed, mind racing. The choice before her was unprecedented. Continue living as Bonnie, pursuing a path that had opened unexpectedly and brought her profound joy, or return to being Graham, the accountant with the structured life and the carpentry hobby. Her gaze fell on the auburn wig. It had become more than just a disguise. It was the symbol of a version of herself that felt increasingly authentic. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door revealed Eliza, her cast decorated with colorful signatures. "I brought breakfast," she said, holding up a paper bag from their favorite bakery. "And news. Did Madame Beaumont call you?" Bonnie nodded, stepping aside to let her sister enter. "She did." They settled at the small kitchen table, Eliza pulling out croissants and coffee. "So?" Eliza prompted. "What are you going to do?" Bonnie took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I don't know how to explain this without sounding crazy." "Try me." When I was dancing, when I'm Bonnie, it feels like I'm finally being honest with myself, like I've been wearing a costume my whole life, but it wasn't the tutu. It was everything else. Eliza reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That doesn't sound crazy to me." "But what about my job? My life? I can't just become someone else overnight." "Why not?" Eliza challenged.
People reinvent themselves all the time, and this isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you really are." The words resonated deeply. Bonnie looked down at her hands. Graham's hands, technically, but increasingly they felt like her own. "I'd need help," she said finally. "I don't know the first thing about any of this." Eliza's smile was radiant. "That's what sisters are for." The decision to accept the scholarship marked the beginning of a remarkable journey. Bonnie took a leave of absence from the accounting firm, explaining that she needed time for personal development. It wasn't a lie. The next several weeks were dedicated to transformation, not just in appearance, but in identity. Bonnie began living full-time as herself, wearing the clothes that felt right, growing accustomed to the weight of the auburn wig until she could begin growing out her own hair. The dance academy became her sanctuary. 5 days a week, she arrived in satin leotards and tights, pushing her body to master techniques that most dancers spent lifetimes perfecting. The other students accepted her presence without question, impressed by her dedication and the unique quality she brought to her performances. Madame Beaumont proved an unexpected ally, adjusting her teaching methods to accommodate Bonnie's different center of gravity and muscle structure. "Dance is about honesty," she told Bonnie during a private lesson. "The body cannot lie. That is why your performances touch people. They sense your truth." As the gala approached, Bonnie's confidence grew. Her movements became more fluid, her expressions more nuanced. The chrysalis was giving way to the butterfly, just as in the dance that had started it all. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling rehearsal, the academy director, Ms. Hartley, asked to speak with Bonnie privately. They sat in her office, surrounded by photographs of famous dancers and playbills from legendary performances. "Your progress has been remarkable," Ms. Hartley began. "The faculty is unanimous in their assessment of your potential." "Thank you," Bonnie replied, smoothing the fabric of her lavender practice dress. "Everyone has been incredibly supportive." Ms. Hartley's expression turned thoughtful. "Bonnie, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. A matter of authenticity." A cold wave of fear washed over Bonnie. Had someone discovered her secret? Was she about to lose everything she'd worked for? "I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully. The director leaned forward. "The dance world values honesty above all else. We cannot truly connect with an audience if we're hiding part of ourselves." Bonnie's throat tightened. "Ms. Hartley,
Let me finish,"
the director said gently.
"I've known since your first performance that you were not the original Eliza Mitchell on our roster. The physical differences were subtle but unmistakable to someone who has spent a lifetime studying human movement." The revelation left Bonnie speechless. All this time, Ms. Hartley had known? "What I didn't expect," the director continued, "was to witness such a profound transformation, not just in technique, but in spirit. The person who dances in my academy now is Bonnie Mitchell, wholly and completely." Tears welled in Bonnie's eyes. "You're not going to ask me to leave?" Ms. Hartley's laugh was warm and genuine. "Leave? My dear, I've been in this business for 40 years. I know talent when I see it, and I know authenticity. You possess both in abundance." Relief flooded through Bonnie, followed by a wave of gratitude so intense it was almost painful. "I've been afraid to tell anyone," she admitted. "Afraid they wouldn't understand." "Understanding comes with time," Ms. Hartley said. "But acceptance? That begins with self-acceptance.
I saw that moment happen on stage during your first performance, the moment you accepted yourself fully. Bonnie wiped away a tear. That's exactly what it felt like. The lavender performance dress suits you beautifully, by the way, Ms. Hartley added. You should wear it for the gala. The International Ballet Competition Gala was held at the Grand Theatre, a historic venue known for its perfect acoustics and ornate architecture. Dancers from around the world had gathered to perform, creating an atmosphere of nervous excitement backstage. Bonnie stood in the wings, wearing the lavender performance dress that had become her signature. Her auburn hair, now beginning to grow out naturally, was styled in an elegant updo, complemented by subtle makeup that enhanced rather than masked her features. Eliza appeared beside her, having graduated from crutches to a walking boot. How are you feeling? Ready, Bonnie said, and meant it. Is it strange that I'm not nervous? Not strange at all. You were born for this moment. The MC announced her name, and Bonnie stepped onto the stage. The theater fell silent, 3,000 people waiting to witness what this emerging talent would deliver. As the music began, the same piece from her first performance, but with subtle variations to show her growth, Bonnie surrendered to the choreography. Each movement flowed into the next, telling the story of her transformation with grace and power. When the final note faded and she struck her closing pose, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Roses were thrown onto the stage, and Bonnie took her bows, heart full to bursting. Backstage again, she was approached by a woman in an elegant black suit. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Miranda Evans from the National Ballet Company. Your performance was extraordinary. We'd like to discuss your future with us, if you're interested. Bonnie's breath caught. The National Ballet Company was the pinnacle of classical dance in the country. I'm very interested, she managed to say. Wonderful. Here's my card. Call me next week and we'll arrange a proper audition. As Miranda walked away, Eliza appeared, eyes wide. Was that who I think it was? Bonnie nodded, still processing what had just happened. The National Ballet Company wants me to audition. I knew it, Eliza said, hugging her tightly. I knew they'd see what I see. Later that evening, as they celebrated at an upscale restaurant with Madame Beaumont and Ms. Hartley, Bonnie found herself reflecting on the improbable journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a reluctant favor had evolved into the most authentic expression of herself she'd ever known. A toast, Ms. Hartley proposed, raising her glass. To Bonnie Mitchell, who reminds us all that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. The glasses clinked together, and Bonnie felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The transformation was complete. The butterfly had emerged, and there was no returning to the chrysalis. In the soft lighting of the restaurant, wearing her lavender dress, and surrounded by people who accepted her completely, Bonnie Mitchell was exactly where she belonged.
Thanks for watching my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!